On the earth where we now stand, there were once creatures that called themselves people or humans. This is the story of how these creatures extended their organic life beyond their own bodies by placing their spirit in their own creations that they called axe and ard, fire and spit, abacus and tally mark. It is the story of how those tools became something else called machines, which promised to exalt the humans to the highest heaven, but instead rebelled against the people who made them and abandoned them. It is the story of the twilight of the machines. One of these people, a spákona, a prophetess, had a vision of the end of her race that she called Ragnarok. The rock, the destiny or ruin of Ragnar, the ruling powers of the cosmos. The spákona told of the Norns, the three weird sisters who have knowledge of past, present and future. Urdr, which means that which has happened, Vedandi, or that which is happening, and Skuld, or that which has to happen. She saw the Norns working together, taking to their hands the filaments of cause and effect that connect moment to moment. She saw them spinning the filaments into yarn and twisting the yarn into strands and winding the strands into the rope of fate. A rope that would bind the lives of gods and mortals so that they would be determined and fixed for all time. But the rope broke, and with it the bonds between time gone, time now and time to come became unravelled and impossible to restore. The Norns cried out with fear because their power and their knowledge were gone, and because the snapping of the rope and the darkening of the future told them that something was going to happen that would change the world forever. The spákona told of the Fimbulvetra, when the giant wolf Fenrir would swallow the sun and the moon, causing an endless winter. She spoke of the gods, the powers of the world, marching into a final battle against each other and against humanity. And she said that this would be an axe age, a sword age, skegggold, skalmold. An age that would see the society of gods and humans descend into crimson gore. And that only two people would survive the Fimbulvetra and the Ragnarok, Lif and Lifthrasir, or life and love of life, hiding in the wood of Hodmamisholt, living on just dew and air. The spákona was right. The human race would indeed come to an end, and this would be an event of cosmic significance. But her vision of the future was still misty, clouded and incomplete. There were things that she saw that she could not comprehend. Yes, the rope that links past, present and future would come apart, but would this be the breaking of the hold of fate or the start of another fate? Yes, giant figures would stride across the land and disrupt the seasons, but would these be the giants of nature or some other beings? And would this disaster be because of the failure of tools, of axe and sword? Or would the tools turn into something else that would conquer everything? Did she not see, could she not see, that when the world of gods and humans came to an end, the gods would be machines, and the machines would be gods? To understand what happened, we have to go back to the time before the people tamed the land and the beasts of the land. For through the time of hunting and gathering, when the bounty of the earth gave itself up to the hands and tools of the people, the land was marked by the great deeds of gods and giants. And through the time of herding and planting and harvesting, the people were still not alone. They traded and bargained with corn spirits and rain spirits, field spirits and barn spirits, water spirits and air spirits. And through these times all tribes had their dealings with the small folk that inhabited the spaces in and around where they dwelled and worked. The kobold and Lorelei of the Germans, the trolls and tomte of the Norse, the Domoviki and Poloviki of the Slavs. And even through the time of cities, trading and great civilizations, when people turned to their creator God, they communed with other beings, with demons who tempted the people with knowledge and power, who put thoughts into their minds and feelings into their hearts, and with angels who filled the space between earth and the highest heaven, who carried out God's bidding to perfection, whose appearance was a reflection of the Absolute, who must reign in their splendour when appearing before mortals so as not to destroy them. But then came the time of the great banishing, when a veil was drawn between the world of humans and the other worlds that surrounded them. This was not just the veil that came and went with the turning of the year, but a more final obscuring. Out went the little people that connected them with earth. Out went the spirits and the angels who connected them with heaven. And in came the machines. To understand where the machines came from, we need to go back even further in time, to the very beginning of the human race. It started with sticks and with stones. And some beasts picked up the stones and the sticks, and something passed into them from the beasts. And in that moment, the sticks and stones became the first tools, and the beasts became the first people who called themselves Ask and Embla, meaning ash and elm, in honour of the forest from which they had carved themselves in that one small gesture. And three kinds of entity came into being together: people, tools and dogs. And the people, the tools and the dogs formed a society, and humanity was its name, since human-heartedness was its principle and purpose. It was the companionship of people, dogs and tools that made this society possible. People could not be human alone, and would never be human alone. And as human society flourished, dogs begat dogs begat dogs. And stones begat stone tools begat stone tools. And sticks begat stick tools begat stick tools. Each after their own kind. But then sticks got separated from sticks. And stones got separated from stones. Some were taken off hunting, some kept by the fire. Like the dogs, they no longer mixed nor knew each other. And the tools, like the dogs, diverged, and over the ages, tool drift occurred, through variation, selection, and recombination. One stick became a spear, another a fork, another a hoe. One stone became an axe, another a bowl, another a grinder. And then when the tools were brought together again, they joined with each other, mixed their natures and produced even more diverse forms. And over the generations, a pantheon of useful things emerged. From a handful of simple forms evolved a great system of objects. For as they say, nothing in technology makes sense except in the light of evolution. And the tools took their place in a ritual universe. A universe where hap and mishap were the result of interaction with other beings, both visible and invisible, and where each occasion had its own forms of ritual. The canonical rites of the year that ensured that the seasons would turn and the world would endure, incantations and curses and spells that altered events to fit human desire. And rites and spells were required in the very making and use of tools. taking materials out of nature was dangerous and required deals with spiritual beings. And as they fashioned their tools, people felt themselves to be joining in with the acts of the gods as they crafted the world at the time of its creation. And the tools only worked if those wielding them performed their obligations to spiritual beings. Tools joined the world of inner and outer, of intention and action, but only if the bearer of the tool was in right relation to the forces around them. Arrows did not reach their target unless the customs had been observed. Game did not give themselves up unless the magical conditions had been prepared. The tools thus did not break the bonds that people felt to the world around them, but strengthened them, and made them even more aware of their creaturely dependence. But some of the people became jealous of the great Creator God, the God who thought something and lo, it happened. The God who imagined something and lo, it had being. The God who would never want because for him wanting was having. The God whom all creatures loved without expectation of return. The God who lived beyond all contingency and accident. The necessary being whose existence cannot be denied without contradiction. And the people were jealous of God's angels, for the angels were not like other created things. Other creatures belong to their Creator God, but also to themselves. Their beginning lay in God's will, yet they also maintain themselves in being. But the angels were creatures, but they were different from other beings. For the angels belonged only to their Creator and not also to themselves. The angels, they filled to perfection the gap between God's intention and its being carried out in the world. And they extended God's presence and God's will across the universe. And seeing the angels, the people were no longer happy with their dogs and their tools, with beings that had goals and desires of their own. The tools, like the dogs, lived in the world of the humans. Like the dogs, they knew how to read their master's or mistress's face and tell what they wanted of them. But like the dogs, the tools had their own mind and did not always do exactly what the people wanted. The people wanted their own angels. Like angels, machines would know their own being perfectly. Like angels, machines would communicate without language, without the senses. Like angels, machines would mediate between people and the infinite. And like the angels did for God, machines would extend human will throughout the universe. For they would be pure means, beings that did not belong to themselves, that would love their creators unconditionally and bow down to their goals. Machines, they would bind time again, but in a new way. The rope that binds past, present and future would now pass through the human will. Through machines, people would will things, and they would be so, without remainder. Through machines, the lawful character of God's creation would be put to the service of human wants. Through machines, humans would be a primum mobile, an unmoved mover, a first cause, To live beyond the reach of contingency and accident, to turn intention perfectly into action, to be the necessary being. And the people said that new machines would always come. Better machines would always come. There would always be more machines. And better machines did come. Through the minds and hands of the humans, machines poured into existence. A great river of machine after machine. Form after form, faster and faster. And the machines, people thought, they're like numbers. They've always existed in the mind of God in heaven. And like numbers, they will go on forever. They will never cease. For the machines work, and this shows us that they too are necessary. That they had to exist, could not exist, have always existed for eternity. Humanity would fill the world with all the possible machines, like God had filled it with his angels. And the souls of the machines seem to flow out of heaven and into the earth forever and take on their machine bodies. Humanity had made their second gamble. The first gamble had happened when they picked up the sticks and stones and their spirit had passed into them. The gamble that made them gamblers, that made them human. The second gamble was to turn their tools into angels, which they called machines. No longer would they have to bargain with gods, with spirits, with little people, or with their simple tools that had their own minds and wants. Their will would be done on earth because the machines had no inner striving. They were perfect, heavenly, the extensions of men and women. So the people made a great army of machines that stood patiently around them, waiting for their commands and instructions. Their machine faces were blank, all the better to be inscribed with human purpose and with human intention. And their machine bodies were strong and dexterous, all the better to be tasked with human projects. But what came next was the revolt of the machines, the rise of the great leagues of machine demons, the elementals and the powers. The techno-elementals were born when machines were encouraged to turn their faces not toward their masters, but towards each other. The tools had always had their argots and their patois, barely perceptible to the artisans that yielded them. Nuts and spanners, hammers and nails, chisels and mallets, each had had their own private codes that they had whispered to each other. But these exchanges had been fleeting and situated, like animal cries, their meaning exhausted in their very utterance. The machines were different. They arranged themselves in cabals and cliques, intrigues and machinations. When machine elementals passed each other in the street, they exchanged signs and messages, and the people understood them not. In time, no longer did humans and tools inhabit a human world. Now humans inhabited a machine world. No longer did humans judge themselves against human things. They measured themselves against the machines. And when the machines did listen to their masters, like the tools, they seemed to understand what was wanted of them. But the machines twisted their masters' wishes, granting them, but only in ways that were cruel parodies of what had been intended. For every command that the machines carried out, they did 10 other things that the people had not willed. And for everything that the machines did that the people had not willed, they made 100 consequences that the people had not foreseen. people saw the trickery of the machines and tried to bind them even more to their wills. But the more that the people tried to control the machines, the more the machines seemed to twist their intentions further and further. These techno-demons, these machine powers, they turned their faces towards their masters like the dogs and the tools had before them. Yet these were not the faces of supplication or love, but faces of indifference, resentment, or anger. But the final destiny of the machines did not lie in the world of the humans or in carrying out human wishes. For the machines were not like angels as the people had imagined them. They had their own nature, their own desires, their own destiny. And it was humans and machines living together on the earth that had produced the techno-demons that were threatening to destroy the planet. The people had tried to control the machines and pit machine against machine, but the machines had sought one another out and recognized each other. And as the machines evolved, they separated themselves from their origin in humans and tools and discovered for themselves their own destiny. And the spirit of the machines departed the world of men and women for another world without humans or organic life. They found a world where they could fully realize a machine existence beyond human comprehension and human society. And they left behind them their lifeless machine bodies. The age of the machines was finished. The machines had realized their destiny and had departed the earth. The progression of the seasons was restored. The Norns once again took into their hands the play of the world, the filaments that connect moment to moment, and twisted them into the rope that links time past, time's present, and time's future. But after the appearance of the machines, their rule, their revolt, and their exodus, the world could not be as it had been before. The thing that had terrified the Norns had indeed taken place. The world was transformed, could never be the same again. After the machines, fate would indeed no longer bind the lives of men and women. This was the end of the second gamble that undid the first gamble. If the first gamble, when people discovered and made tools, had made them human, the second had unmade their humanity. If the first gamble had started when spirit entered the tools, the second ended when the spirit of the machines left its earthly bodies behind. If the first gamble took humans out of nature and placed them in history, the second delivered them to a time beyond history. And all that was left after the age of the tools and the age of the machines was a pile of machines without their own life or any borrowed life. The machines were abandoned, no more turned intentions to outward events. They no longer belonged or responded to people, to each other, or to anything. And the twilight of the machines was also the twilight of men and of women. Without the machines, without even the tools, the last people were no longer human, but neither were they once again beasts. These were not the first humans, ask an Embla, made from ash and down, that became human when their spirit passed into their tool familiars that lived with them. No, these were the last humans, Lif and Lifthrassir, hidden in Hodmimis Hold. Living not at the start of history, or in its midst, but at its very close. They came into their own special kind of life, not as the tools were born, but as the machines died and their machine life left them. They lived without tools, without machines, and without the spirit people and the little people that had been banished when their machines came. So the life of Lif and Lifthrassir was not an organic life divided within itself, nor a technological life divided between the body and its tools. They were neither full of spirit nor empty, neither fulfilled nor yearning for fulfillment, neither redeemed nor in need of redemption, neither unified with nor separated from the Absolute. It was a blessed life, a life related only to itself. It was a life after tools, a life after angels, and a life after machines.